welcome into the Slobberknocker Sports Podcast, College Football Edition. It is November 6th. We are here Wednesday evening to talk everything college football. We had the first college football rankings come out. We're going to look at those and talk some big games. We have a very special guest today. She is a brilliant lawyer and college football expert, makes a ton of great college football content on her Twitter or X page. So welcome to the show, Michelle. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you guys so much for having me. Really happy to be here.
So let's jump in. So the college football playoff rankings came out yesterday. I kind of just want to discuss them. Michelle, what were your initial thoughts? Anything you disagreed with, or what did you like about the rankings so far?
Honestly, I didn't really have like a big issue with the top 1 to 4. They all looked pretty good, based on strength of schedule, quality wins, quality losses. I definitely, though, started to take issue after that with Texas, Penn State, other teams that had a loss coming in before teams like Indiana. Right? Indiana's looked so dominant, and a lot of people have said this, but I will repeat it because I agree with it. I think if the logo on their helmet was different, you'd be seeing a lot different treatment from the College Football Playoff Committee. I think the same is true with Miami, although their games have been a lot closer than Indiana. So I would say those are kind of the two teams that I take most issue with, but otherwise, generally pretty fair.
I think you're absolutely right about Indiana. Miami, I know they're undefeated. I still have them probably 3. We've touched on it a few times on our podcast about, if you've watched a lot of their games, they could have 3 losses. They should have lost to your California Bears, obviously. Yeah, and then we talked on it quite a bit, but the end of the Virginia Tech game, if the roles are reversed and that's Miami catching the ball, there's a 0% chance that gets overturned. So
totally,
yeah. But I do love Cameron Ward. He played here in San Antonio at Incarnate Word. That's where he started his college career, and then went to Washington State, and then now at Miami, he's killing it. So.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. If you're going to put Miami 4, then I don't get how Indiana and BYU are 8-9. That was, again, I had the same exact comments. Like, all 3 of them have lower strength of schedules than a lot of the one-loss teams. But if you're going to put Miami up there, I don't get why Indiana and BYU aren't up there as well. Yeah, just looking at these, who do you think, is there a team outside the top 12 right now you think has a good shot to get in and make some noise in the college football playoff?
It's so hard, right? There's just so much parity. I mean, that's what I love so much about this 2024 season. It's just been full of surprises and teams that you never expect to be good being good, teams you expected to be great being bad. I can't really say off the top of my head. I was really high on Utah, for example, coming into this season. They're one of the worst teams in the country right now. So I don't really know. Colorado is an interesting one. Right? I think Colorado has an opportunity to make a big splash. They're kind of peaking at the right time. And I think the media, certainly with all of the attention surrounding the program and surrounding Deion, I think would benefit a lot from having Colorado in the playoff. It would just make for a lot of interesting discussion. So that's one I think I could see sort of sneaking in.
Especially with the Big 12 being just kind of wide open. Anybody can win.
Last week, they didn't play. Iowa State went down to Tech. Yeah. Kansas State goes down to Houston, and all of a sudden they win out. They're right there. I think if they win out, they need Iowa State to lose once, and then I think they would be in. So they get an Iowa State loss, then they would get in and control their own destiny. I believe that's correct.
They haven't played Iowa State, right?
They don't play Iowa
State. They don't
State.
play them. Got it.
The only team I would say that I thought has a chance to get in is if Ole Miss beats Georgia this week. We are both high on Ole Miss at the start of the season. Obviously, they have 2 pretty bad losses. They should have beaten LSU without a doubt that game. And then the Kentucky loss is inexplicable at home. But I like Ole Miss. I like Lane Kiffin a ton.
Sober Lane Kiffin. He's different.
He's
behaving himself.
Maybe Sharon Moore should become sober. Maybe that would.
Yeah, what's up with your Wolverines? What's going on? Are they going to be able to turn this around in the next couple of years?
In the next couple of years, hopefully. I would say to their credit, they've invested a lot in NAL. Their philosophy under Jim Harbaugh was a little bit different. I think he was a little bit more committed to, having a team that was homegrown, and he had the internal resources to do it, right? One of the big losses Michigan suffered that not enough people talk about is the strength and conditioning coach, Ben Herbert. Like, he was really the secret sauce of that team and allowed Michigan to take in a lot of 2- and 3-star guys and turn them into NFL draft prospects, right? Because what they were doing within the program was so compelling. But without that, you really do need to invest more in NIL and kind of catch up. And I think they're behind based on being under Jim Harbaugh's philosophy with Jim Harbaugh's resources for the past few seasons. But I think they will get there because I think they are adapting. They just haven't yet.
Yeah, Dave Portnoy to the rescue, right? Says he's gonna
will save us.
Yeah.
Do you think Sharon Moore's the right guy?
I do.
Okay.
I do think he is the right guy for now. He, like I said, suffered a lot of losses coming into this season. I couldn't imagine who Michigan would have hired given the other losses they sustained if they wanted to preserve what I think is one of their greatest assets, which was their culture from Team 144. If they wanted to keep at least that going, they needed him at the helm. But I do have some questions about the other coordinators, whether those internal promotions with regard to the OC were the right call. And then, the defensive coordinator position is looking a little sus as well. It's just not the Michigan defense that most Michigan fans are used to at this point. But yeah.
You guys were spoiled last year, though. That was easily the best defense in college football. So
yeah.
It was a beautiful thing to watch.
That Michigan team last year, I think, would be favored by 5 or 6 points over any team this year. I think that's pretty not wild to say at all. There's nobody. I don't see anybody like as a juggernaut this year. And speaking of that, like I was going to ask you this anyway, how many of these teams in this college football ranking do you think have a shot to actually win the whole thing?
So I love that there are so many. Like, I have to say that about the 12-team playoff and the fact that we're seeing so much parity now with the transfer portal and with NIL. I know a lot of people have a lot of complaints about the evolution of the sport, but I think the way that it has evolved has at least made it much more interesting as a fan, as someone who just loves the sport generally. But I do think there are probably 6 teams, honestly, which is crazy to say. That I don't think we would have been able to say that in any other year before, who I think are legit contenders. I would say Oregon, definitely. It pains me to say it, but Ohio State is always going to be in the conversation, especially in a year when Michigan is down. I think Georgia, obviously, same story. You really can never count them out. We'll get to them later, I think, but you can never count them out. Texas, man, they're kind of up and down, but again, they're well coached. I think they've got QB options. And then Miami, right? And I came into the season not liking Miami, and Cam Ward really proved me wrong and broke my heart a few times. But the one thing we know about him is that he's never out of a game. And I think when you've got a wild card like him at quarterback, you just can never count out. I think Miami's in the conversation too. So, and then Indiana, right? I'm super high in this Indiana team. I would love to see it. I know it's unlikely, but it's been unlikely. It's unlikely that they would be where they are now. So, man, you just can never, I never want to discount or write off, what a Cinderella story that would be.
Oh, yeah, it would be awesome. And I'm sure you'll be rooting hard for the Hoosiers against the Buckeyes next week, not this one.
Did their quarterback for Indiana come back this week?
Rourke, I'm not sure. No, he didn't come back last week. I don't know. Is he playing this week? I actually don't know.
I am not sure either.
I just hope they get him back for the Buckeyes game is all I
Yeah.
hope. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen this week, but
Yeah.
That would actually be ideal. The ideal time
Yes,
to come back.
yeah.
Not a game too soon. You got to make sure he's well rested for that.
Okay, we can move on here. Oh, sorry, one more question. If you had to pick a champion right now, who would you pick? If you had to pick a national champion?
I love Oregon, honestly. I think Oregon is the most complete team. I think they're very well coached. I think they're super hungry too, having never won a national title before. And then I think this is like a sneaky advantage that people don't talk about with Oregon, but the rest of their schedule is kind of cake,
Yep.
which allows them relative to the other contenders in the Big Ten to keep a lot off of film, right? I think they play Maryland, they play some other teams, but Ohio still has to play Indiana. They still have to play Michigan. I know Michigan is in a down year, but they're still going to give it their all. It's just going to take a lot more out of Ohio State than what Oregon is going to have to put on film to get to that Big Ten championship game. So I think they're in the best position to do it, and they'd be my favorite if I had to bet on it today. And I like Oregon fine.
Yeah, they've looked like the best team in the country so far, and obviously they have the win against Ohio State at home, which was impressive. Although that OPI at the end of the game was a little bit debatable, but I'm sure you were glad that they called it.
Clever, man. Manning did the same thing to us.
Yeah.
He was in a formation, got Michigan, a penalty that they didn't expect. He's just really smart. And again, I think that goes to the coaching advantage. He knows the rule book, he uses it to his advantage, and that's just some next level stuff.
Yep. Yeah, we talked about that on the show. It was really
that was next level stuff there. As soon as he did it, I was like, oh, I know exactly what he's doing. And then, like you said, this week against it was against Michigan, where he went out in that punt formation knowing someone was going to line up right over the center.
Yep.
He's a very,
was it a 7-point game at that time, wasn't it? Or it was not a blowout at that point.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
There was still I felt a glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
Still.
that was we were talking about that at your house. That was a brutal, if you bet Michigan in that game, that was a brutal
plus 14.5.
Yeah, the play down on the goal line where the quarterback knocked himself out on the camera. It was not a good sequence of events.
It felt like a metaphor.
For the whole season. Let's go on to some big game breakdowns. We have some good matchups this week, and we mentioned this one earlier. Number 3, Georgia traveling to Oxford to take on Ole Miss. Georgia's a 2.5-point favorite. Total on the game 55. Last year, Georgia smacked the Rebels in Athens 51-14 rather. But the last time Georgia went to Oxford was back in 2016. And Ole Miss actually won the game 45-14. It was Kirby Smart's biggest loss as the coach of Georgia. So there is some history there. But just looking at this Ole Miss offense versus the Georgia defense, which is not looked like a normal Georgia defense this year, what are some of the key matchups you're looking at, Michelle?
Well, I think, are you guys seeing a 2.5-point line here? Yeah, that's what I'm looking at too. And I feel like it reflects a little bit of recency bias, given that we saw Georgia struggle against Florida and that we saw Ole Miss just absolutely destroy Arkansas, right? So in light of that, it is maybe surprising, not so surprising. I know Carson Beck has looked shaky. I just think what I love about the season, like I said, is there were just different versions of this Georgia team. And are we going to get the version, that sorry to bring this up.
Beat the hell out of Texas.
Walked into Austin. Look, I like Texas in that game. I picked Texas in that game.
So did we. Yeah, we liked them too.
But look, the fact of the matter is, Kirby, he is a wizard at taking doubt and low expectations and turning it into something magical. And I would say that helps me to like Georgia here, even though what I saw last week would lead me to pick Ole Miss by a million, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, Georgia usually, Kirby Smart gets the best out of them in big games. I mean, he's a wizard at that, like you said. In this spot, I don't know what's going on with Carson Beck. When he was throwing those interceptions against Florida, I brought this up to you, and then he goes to the bench. He's sitting by himself, and it almost looked like when Jay Cutler used to throw picks for the Bears. Smoking Jay, he sits there. There's not a lot of emotion on his face, and I'm like, what's going on with this guy? It just doesn't – he does not look like himself. Obviously, they beat UT on the road, smoked them, but that was much more because of their defense than Carson Beck. I love the way Jackson Dart's playing. Been unbelievable the last couple weeks. I think, and I'm probably picking with my heart here a little bit. I'm hoping that Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss end up getting the win, but I think they will. I think they're going to beat Georgia.
I'm rooting for Ole Miss for sure, but My issue with this is Ole Miss's offensive line. Outside the top 70 in pass block win rate, outside the top 70 in run block win rate, and they're going up against Michael Williams. It's just a tough matchup. I saw Texas's O-line was supposed to be the best in the country going into that game. That's what I thought. That's what a lot of people thought, and they looked like a JV offensive line when they actually got after the quarterback there. And then everybody's yelling to put Arch Manning in, including myself, and he goes out there and he looked terrible for 2 drives too. So it was clearly an overpowering performance by the Georgia D-line, and I think we're going to see something similar before last week. And I think you brought up a good point with Ole Miss. They were averaging 24 points per game in SEC play before last week. So it's that one game versus a bigger sample size. And I agree. I'm rooting for Ole Miss, but I lean Georgia strongly in that one for sure.
I would say one counterpoint is that if you look back at that Texas game, what made Georgia successful was really leaning on ETN in that run game, right? And Beck looking shaky against Florida last week, I think is going to sort of direct Georgia toward the run game even more. I don't think they want to risk turning the ball over in this spot, but Ole Miss has been really good against the run, which I think will make it challenging for Georgia to play the lower risk run game it wants to play with ETN. I think it's going to force them to play that higher risk passing game. And if we see the same version of Beck we saw last week, I think it could be trouble. So Ole Miss run defense, I think if Ole Miss pulls this out, that's going to be the reason.
That's a great point. I think I saw something. They're top 5 in every meaningful rush statistic defensively. They're phenomenal against the run. Okay.
I like my pick even better now. I didn't know that, but I like it even better.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Let's move on to that Big 12 game we were talking about earlier. Colorado, Texas Tech. Both teams coming with 6 wins. Colorado right back in the mix for the Big 12 title game, like we said. I see Colorado as a 3.5-point favorite here. Like you said, Colorado's been playing a lot better football as of late, kind of peaking at the right time. Tech off that big upset. What are your thoughts on this one?
And this whole slate of big games is really testing me because my favorite thing in the world is to pick a home dog. And I want to pick Texas Tech, and I just cannot based on the matchup. I just can't. And I think the reason is because Colorado has such a prolific passing attack. They just have been looking so good. And on the flip side of it, Texas Tech has such a prolifically terrible secondary.
They always have. They always have.
Second to last in passing yards allowed when I checked it. Like, that matchup is devastating. Like, I look at that and I say, how is it only a 3.5-point spread under those circumstances? Like, at Colorado, in my view, is at least a touchdown better. And I know Colorado has not looked great defensively, but they are improving. Right?
The defense is playing much, much, much better. And I think that's the turnaround. Yeah.
And so some of the defensive statistics right now, they reflect an entire season's worth of work. But I think the latter half of the season tells a different story than the beginning. And this is a team I worried about, especially with all of the transfers, being cohesive early on, right? When you bring in that many guys through the portal, when you have a culture that's sort of as volatile and dynamic as that one, like, it's hard to get things to gel quickly. But I think the advantage to Colorado is that, they struggled with that in the beginning, but I think they're getting there now, and they're getting there at the right time. So I really like Colorado in this spot.
That's a good point. I'm in the sports betting space kind of, and a lot of people are hesitant to adjust power rankings throughout the season very heavily. But in this new world of college football, when you have such a big adjustment from an entire new team come in, sometimes you have to. And I think that's a really good point here from Colorado. It's like they look like a different team from week 1 against North Dakota State, where they barely hung on, to last week or 2 weeks ago. They've looked significantly better. And then, like you said, they've got Shedeur Sanders, who I think, you could argue Cam Ward or him, but I think he's going to be the best pro quarterback in this class. The defense, like you said, looks much better. And Morton, quarterback for Tech, he's been a little banged up. He was out with a concussion 2 weeks ago. He had 3 turnovers last week, I believe, against Iowa State, despite the win. And like you said, that Tech defense is just suspect. I like Colorado in this spot too.
We've been noted Colorado haters on this show for a long time. Yeah, noted Colorado haters. But I told him, I think it was 2 weeks ago, like you had mentioned, it really is on the defensive side of the ball that they've been so much better. I mean, they were so bad for so long. And also, even going back to the beginning of the year, that win, and people will laugh that don't know FCS football. I know FCS football. North Dakota State has showed up to be the best team in FCS. Everybody thought it was going to be South Dakota State. North Dakota State's a really good football team. They ended up winning that game, and the defense just looks way better the last 3 weeks. I didn't think Colorado had the depth to be this good. They have, obviously good players at premier positions, but I hate to agree, but I think they're going to win the game too. I think they're going to beat Texas Tech.
We got a clean sweep here.
So that means they're going to lose now.
Yeah.
Red Raiders.
Former Red Raider right here. Michelle, do you bet on these games usually? Do you actually wager or not?
I do bet. I have some rules about my betting.
Smart.
I never bet very much. And I only bet things that are fun, which means only overs, never unders. And
especially in college football, there's nothing worse than trying to bet an under in college football. You can't do it.
What a buzzkill.
Right.
I don't know. Only overs. And like I said, only money lines because I love an upset. And you just get like the best odds on those, right? So like I don't win as often, obviously, betting money lines, but I like plus odds when I can find them, and those are my rules. So
I like it. Dylan's really good picking against the spread. I don't know what your record is this year that we give
21-9. 21-9. Yeah.
And I somehow I'm terrible, but I'm retired now. I don't gamble anymore, but I give picks away, and I've hit how many overs?
5 overs in a row.
Yeah.
No unders.
Only the overs. 5 overs in a row, baby. Life's too short to bet the under, and like I said, I'm retired, so I don't even have to think. I don't even have to think them through. But
let's look at the last big game. Although I think I'll let you touch on the Michigan game at the end if you have time. Alabama traveling to Baton Rouge, take on LSU. I saw this open 2.5. I think it's 3 now. Total was 58.5. This is basically a de facto elimination game. I think whoever loses this game will have 3 losses and probably will not make the college football playoff. So huge game. I think I saw LSU has won over 30 games in a row playing under the lights at Tiger Stadium. So very, very tough spot.
Nothing like it.
So what are your thoughts? Is Alabama going to go into Baton Rouge and get a win here?
Okay, I think that statistic.
Is it wrong?
Didn't Tennessee beat them at home under the lights a couple years ago?
It's very possible. I heard it on ESPN this week when they beat the last game they just won at home against Ole Miss.
But that was my first point was going to be Baton Rouge under the lights. I'm almost always going to take LSU.
Regardless, I appreciate you calling out Dylan on his bullshit stats he gives because I don't look into them. So now we have someone that does, and your statistics are wrong.
Was it wrong? I don't know.
I don't know.
Community knows it. But it is a decisive advantage. It's a really, and I am very, I liked LSU against Ole Miss, a few weeks ago, bet them money line primarily for that reason, because I thought it was pretty significant. But I do think Alabama may take this by more than 3. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One, the biggest one I think is that LSU's offense has just looked a little bit one-dimensional. They're having to rely a lot on Nussmeier. They don't really have a credible running threat. And that makes them different than the teams that Alabama has struggled against. If you look at Alabama's recent close games against South Carolina, against Vandy, against Tennessee, all those games had the same thing in common. Alabama was outrushed. They were beat on the ground. And LSU is not going to do that here. I'm almost confident. And if you look at the games where LSU has lost, right, against USC, they really struggled against Woody Marks. And if you look at The other, I can't remember their other loss right now. What was their other
for
loss?
LSU, A&M.
Texas A&M.
A&M. Oh,
Yes,
yeah,
A&M.
that's what.
Yeah.
So it was Marcel Reed, right? Marcel Reed's ground game was really a deciding factor in that comeback for A&M. And I think Milroe is a Marcel Reed on steroids. Honestly, I think he's even better than Marcel Reed, and I think he's got a better passing attack, especially with Ryan Williams if he needs him. So I like Alabama here. I think they will I think they will win the rushing game, and I think that's what will make this game different than the other spots where Alabama has struggled.
Yeah,
I think she nailed it. Yeah, LSU's absolutely one-dimensional. You have Nessmeyer throwing the ball 50 times in an SEC game. Like, it's the Big 12 back in 2010. It's insane. They cannot run the ball. I know LSU's a tough place to play, but like you nailed it. Milroe is far, far better than Marcel Reed, and he can throw it a little bit. Williams is electric. I think I'm going to say Alabama wins this by 7 to 10 points. I think they're going to win the game. I think LSU will score some points just because Alabama's secondary they're fine, obviously, but when you throw the ball 50 times and you can't run the ball, I totally agree. I think Alabama wins this by 7 to 10 points. Hardest place to play in the country, but I just think Alabama's that much better.
Ole Miss had plenty of chances that last game they played at Tiger Stadium at night to put that game away too. And I think this Alabama team's a little bit better than that Ole Miss team. You made some really good points. That when Marcel Reed went into the game against LSU, they ran 22 plays, 22 of them were runs. And I would venture to guess that double digits were Marcel Reed runs. And I wrote the exact same thing, that Jalen Milroe is a better version of Marcel Reed. So I just, Blake Baker, the new DC for LSU, has done a good job. That defense was historically bad the last couple of years. He came over from Missouri. Really, they've gotten a lot better, but this is a tough spot. Like you said, they struggled with what Bama does well. LSU's not playing ball control. That's how Vandy beat them, really. Just control the clock, control the ball, long possessions. LSU's not doing that. And when Nussmeier's had to throw 40, 50 times, it's not led to success for them. That's why they've lost.
Except against Ole Miss somehow.
Well, he was 20 of 51 that game.
No, I know. I don't know. I still am unsure on how they won that game. Maybe that's just the under the light LSU magic.
Yeah,
that's
maybe
so. Is the way it is. But
yeah. Michelle, you want to touch on the last one on Michigan, Indiana here? Michigan is catching 14 in this game.
I will never pick against Michigan. I will just say that I'm deeply concerned about how this game goes. That is a pretty big spread, though. It's crazy. If you would have told me last year when I was at the Big House watching Michigan beat Indiana like 51-7, that the following year Indiana would be favored by more than one score, I would be shocked. But here we are. This Indiana team is really good. Like I said, they really have done an incredible thing there. The things that give me hope for Michigan are, I think they are moving in the right direction at this point. The Michigan State game was the best evidence of that. It was going to be hard to tell against Oregon just because Oregon is so good. But I think the Michigan State game really gave us an insight into what Michigan can be when it's operating well. There were no turnovers. There were no penalties. Penalties have been a problem for this team all year. They killed us in the Washington game when we lost. They killed us in Illinois. Turnovers have killed us all season. And that Michigan State game, we were able to play really cleanly. And I think if we can replicate that against Indiana, it will be helpful. The thing about this team, too, is there are a lot of guys on there who played Indiana last year and spanked them by like 50 points. And there's a lot of pride that comes from that, right? That comes from a memory of Indiana being a team that you just looked past comfortably every season and not wanting to lose to them, even though they are obviously a different version of a football team this year. So I'm hoping those things will be helpful. I do think at least they have some concept of a plan with Davis Warren and Alex Orji, but we're missing a lot. I mean, we have a lot of injuries, especially in the secondary. That's going to be tough.
Is Will Johnson playing? Is he going to play?
Oh, he's out. Yeah. I think he's definitely out. We're also missing Jair Hill in the secondary. Like it's rough back there. And that's not a secret, right? Unfortunately, right? That Michigan secondary is just one of, a few differences between this team and last year's team.
Oh, there's a lot of differences. yeah, a lot of differences.
Davis Warren actually played good. I mean, he had an 89 QBR last game. I know he didn't throw for a ton of yards, but he has not been bad the last couple games. Thrown 3 touchdowns, no picks, above an 80 QBR in both games versus Michigan State and Oregon. So that's, I guess, a positive to look forward to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to bet this, especially watching Michigan play last week, I would definitely lean towards taking the points with Michigan, especially with Rourke not playing, which I assume he's not, even with all the injuries there. But okay, that wraps up for a big game breakdown. I really only have one last question here. I'm just curious if you had to pick a Heisman right now, who it would be.
I struggled with this. I love Travis Hunter. I haven't been, super high in Colorado as a team, and especially early in the season, but he's just such a remarkable player. His ability to play both sides of the ball equally effectively, the difference that he makes in each game. And he just is a generational talent. And I think if the Heisman is to mean anything, it should mean that it goes to that guy you watch and who makes you say, like, how does he do that? Right? The guy that makes your jaw drop. So I like Travis Hunter, but I think Cam Ward probably has the more realistic shot, just based on the fact that the Heisman voting does tend to favor teams that are more in the thick of the playoff hunt. But believe me, if Colorado works its way into that 12-team playoff or even gets somehow into the Big 12 title game, I think Travis Hunter he's got to be it, right? I don't know. What do you guys think?
I like Travis Hunter just because, like what you touched on, plays both sides of the ball. Love that. But my heart can't take Colorado getting to the playoff. I'm going to get so much shit from my brothers who said Colorado was going to be good and all kinds of other people. But I would be very happy with Cameron Ward winning it or Travis Hunter. I hope it's one of those two guys. But
my guy is Ashton Genty, and I love Travis Hunter. But if you take Ashton Genty's rush yards after contact, he is second in the nation in running with those yards alone. And he runs behind an offensive line with 0 NFL offensive linemen. Yes, they're not playing the best teams in the country, but what did he have against Oregon? 190 and 3 touchdowns against a really good defense. So I don't know. That's who I lean, just because you looked at, they showed the numbers of like the last 3 running back Heismans and like where he was at that point, like midway through the season. He had like 500 yards more and like 7 more touchdowns than the next closest guy. But I would have no issue with Travis Hunter, because I agree with what you said. The spirit of the Heisman to me would be a Travis Hunter type guy winning it, who plays both sides of the ball. He's electric to watch. He's their best receiver and best corner. And like you said, if they get to the college football playoff, I would be actually surprised if they didn't give it to him.
Yeah, I think they'll give it to him if they make the playoff for sure.
But Cam Ward, like you said, just because also just traditionally it's been quarterbacks, right? So it just feels like if Colorado loses one more time and Boise doesn't get to the playoff, they're just going to give it to Cam Ward, I think.
I think you may have talked me in to Ashton Genty, honestly. And here's what I love about what you said. Like he just is so remarkable, notwithstanding like whatever else is around him. And the fact that he played Oregon may be the most fortuitous circumstance of this entire thing, because they look like they're going to be the number 1 team in the country. Right. And it's not like, if you look at the rest of Boise State's schedule, it is what it is, right? But like, they played the number 1 team in the country, and he still did that.
Yes.
and Boise State had every chance to win that game. They should have won.
They should have won that game.
Oregon ran a punt back and a kickback, right? I mean, it was crazy. Boise State should have won that game.
And they won it because of him, because he just ran all over that incredible defense. It was something to watch. Yeah.
And it's been a long day. I kind of forgot about Genty, but I kind of agree with you.
I know. I was surprised you didn't even bring him up.
I started. This is a late podcast. I started drinking, a while ago. But yeah, Genty's a great pick.
Yeah.
And I would be. It really is a 3-man race at this point, right? It's like Genty, Hunter, and Ward.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't be shocked if anybody else won it at this point.
I don't think there's anybody else. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
If Curtis
go ahead.
If Curtis Rourke beats Ohio State, Curtis Rourke, man, nobody's talking about him, but like,
I think had he not gotten injured and they were undefeated and they beat Ohio State, he would be legitimately in the conversation. He might still get in there, but I just think those 3 games of like his statistics are going to suffer compared to the other guys, you know. But I agree with you. Like, he's been incredible. He's been awesome. We talked about Indiana like week 2 or 3, and we were kind of looking at their schedule, and I was watching play. I was like, you know what? They could make a little bit of a run here, and they just keep winning. It's pretty fun to watch. Yeah. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. I'll put your, not that you need help with followers, but I'll put your Twitter on our little thing down there. Hopefully you enjoyed being on with us. We really, really appreciate it. You are welcome to come on anytime and talk college football with us. So we can't tell you how much we appreciate you coming on here.
Absolutely. I love it so much. This is my favorite thing to do. So I really appreciate you guys having me. It was awesome.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.